There is a mountainous island in the western Pacific Ocean. We call her the island of Formosa, the beautiful island. She is like a great ship abundantly full of the treasures of life. And we insignificant beings, like reef organisms, take the island as our strong refuge. Perhaps she is not only a beautiful island, but also a living being. The central mountains form her spine. Lakes, wetlands, waterfalls, rivers, all are living sources of water. Forests beckon, and badlands harbor the seeds of life. She is Mother Nature and is the quiet protector of all living creatures. Living on this island, we always only see her strong and unyielding side. But forget that she may also suffer harm. Bow Dow. Around 6 million years ago, the Philippine Sea and the Eurasian plates underwent a massive collision, and the mountainous island was born. While its mountains appear eternally unchanging, they are only building block castles made of heaped-up rock, debris, sand, and the bodies of ancient living organisms. Behind their solid facade lies a fragile inner nature. The island's fragility, a scree slope. At the most fragile places on this island, weathering is causing the rock to crumble and fall. In this creeping river of rock, lichens clinging to the rocks form the most dominant community of living creatures. The large earthquake of September 21st, 1999, left a wound through the island's heart that is hard to heal. The Central Cross Island Highway was once an important transportation artery between East and West. Today, 20 years after the earthquake, the road is still constantly affected by landslides. Beauty of the island. Wildlife. Apart from needing to face the challenges of the natural world, the wildlife on this island must also face land development and economic growth. But while these have brought us prosperity and comfort, they have also gradually destroyed wildlife habitat and have begun to engulf our living spaces. In order to protect this beautiful yet fragile island, several areas have been designated as protected areas. There are 22 nature reserves, 6 conservation areas, 20 wildlife refuge, 37 major wildlife habitats, 9 national parks, and 1 national nature park. The island has a total of 95 natural conservation areas, which occupy nearly 1/5 of the island's land area. However, because steadily worsening habitat fragmentation has been occurring outside these conservation areas, wildlife has been facing an unprecedented threat to their survival. The spine of the island, the Central Mountain Range. In order to ease the problem of habitat fragmentation, people in Taiwan are embarking on a plan to make the Central Mountain Range a corridor for conservation. The skin of the island. Vegetation. The island's largest ecosystem is comprised of forest. It forms a skin on the land and covers the ground surface, softening the impact of falling rain. In this Taiwan fir forest, there are many organisms that look like sponges. Like this layer of moss. They can absorb vast quantities of water that they will then very gradually release. The forests and vegetation at different elevations all function like sponges, which lets them preserve the island's precious water resources. Taiwan fir forms some of the highest elevation forests on the island, and these forests are the coldest areas of Taiwan. The island's icebox, the Ice Age. The Formosa Typhoon Zero searches constantly for leaves that are not buried by ice and snow so that it can survive the winter. During the Quaternary period, the island was engulfed in the Ice Age. As seawater was transformed into ice caps at the planet's poles, the sea level fell. At that time, wildlife took advantage of the intermittent land bridge between Taiwan and the Asian mainland to migrate and settle on the island. Although the Ice Age is now past, we still see numerous marks made by glaciers on Taiwan's highest peaks. At an elevation of 3,520 meters, Green Pond is the island's highest body of water. Because strong winds blow throughout the year in the high mountains, trees and plants can only creep along the ground. Green Pond is surrounded by a patch of tall forest. Thanks to plentiful moisture and protection from the wind, the trees can extend out in all directions. This is the island's largest expanse of pure Yushan juniper forest. Eyes of the island constitutes forest wetland. This pond, hidden in the forest, is termed a forest wetland. Although forest wetlands are not large in area, they each have their own characteristic features. The Tayao Asahina dragonfly is found only in mid and high elevation mountains. Because of their low temperature, mountain ponds harbor very little aquatic life, which can be active for only a very short part of the year. The dragonfly's naiad must swim around trying to find and consume any small prey that have fallen into the water. The lowland forest wetlands have an entirely different appearance. This large wetland has an area of 5 hectares. Thanks to the approximately 4,000 millimeters of rain that falls in this area each year, the margin of Yuanyang Lake is extremely wet. Apart from providing animals with a place to drink and bathe, the forest wetland also creates a microhabitat, nurturing many organisms not found anywhere else. The burr-reed, Sparganium phalanx, is a rare plant found in Yuanyang Lake and Shenmi Lake. Apart from providing food and refuge to animals, the rich aquatic plants in the mid and low elevation forest wetlands also help to regulate the microclimate. There is a stable population of the endemic species Luz chapalura living in Shenmi Lake. Forest wetlands, living organisms. It seems like forest wetlands have their own life path and undergo birth, growth, getting old, illness, and eventually death. An open pond will eventually become dry land as sediment and organic matter accumulate. However, there is another kind of land that can be found in such habitats. This area looks like dry land, but it is actually composed of the interwoven roots of plants, which form a natural floating island. These wetlands are like the island's eyes and reflect the relationship between humans and nature. When people make an effort to protect nature, lakes and ponds can preserve their own vitality. The island's arteries, rivers. Unlike most steep and turbulent mountain streams, this stretch of the river is relatively gentle. It harbors the world's only surviving salmon, living on a subtropical island, the Formosan Masu salmon. Protected by this wildlife refuge, this landlocked salmon spends its whole lifespan of roughly 3 to 5 years in this stream. The island's complexion, temperate deciduous forest. Protected by the Cultural Asset Preservation Act, Taiwan Beach form a temperate deciduous forest seldom seen on subtropical islands. After the Ice Age passed, they migrated steadily from the lowlands to these mountain peaks and ridges. The differences in elevation between different mountain ranges have created the isolated environments that allowed these salamanders to evolve into different forms. As a result, these salamanders and nature reserves exist in beautiful solitude. The lungs of the island, forests. The subtropical rainforest in these low-elevation mountains has been dubbed the island's Amazon. Like the Amazon rainforests, the Earth's lungs, almost every square inch is thick with vegetation, including the forest canopy, understory, underbrush, and ground. Apart from providing wildlife with safe refuge, nature reserves also bear witness to adaptation and evolution. The appendix of the island, Badlands. Bare ground surface, uplifted soil. The steady erosion by rainfall over the years has formed countless unusually shaped gullies. Because these badlands have no human use, they are like the body's appendix, seemingly useless. But this is not actually true. Like all nature reserves, here they provide a refuge for wildlife. Formosa and Siro are found on Mount Jojo Nature Reserve, where they can live undisturbed. Coastal sand dunes form the island's desert, but this apparently desolate area also nurtures species not found in other places. Near the seaside dunes, the estuary wetlands are like an oasis in the desert. The river transports large quantities of organic matter to the estuary wetlands, where it nourishes mangroves. Mangroves can both beautify the seacoast and are naturally self-repairing. Liver and kidney of the islands, estuary wetlands. Estuary wetlands are the most productive ecosystems. Apart from providing abundant sources of food for many species, estuary wetlands are also important breeding areas for many birds. For black-faced spoonbills, such a rare, magnificent bird, this area is their second home. Mother Nature provides us with ample support for our life, but our existence hangs on the fate of wildlife. The construction of roads and trails seems to be beneficial to collared bush robins. Frequent human activities have scared away the natural enemies of collared bush robins and have had a great impact on interactions between species. Some animals have gradually lost their ability to survive in the wild due to the presence of humans. The seldom seen Mikado pheasant and Swinhoe's pheasant take great caution when crossing roads. Some boldly flap their wings to express dominance to other pheasants. The fragmentation of habitat has made it difficult for wild animals to expand their gene pools. This has raised a danger sign for the health of the island's wildlife and ecosystems. The center of this island has a special topographical structure, a structure that can resist and weaken typhoons. Central Mountain Range, the island spine. Human skeleton, this range consists of an intricate series of ridges. Apart from providing a refuge to all living creatures, the mountain range also links different nature reserves. Accordingly, people have begun planning a Central Mountain Range conservation corridor linking different protected areas. It is hoped that this will strengthen the function of existing protected areas, ease the problems caused by habitat fragmentation, and preserve genetic exchange between different protected areas. Peon Structural Line, the dividing line between two major mountain ranges. This is the geographic dividing line between the Shuishan Range and the Central Mountain Range. Ceylon Major Wildlife Habitat. This wildlife habitat protects some of the largest existing primeval groves of red cypress and Taiwan yellow cypress. Forest Corridor, land of the island giants. Although these giants will fall someday, their offspring will carry on their mission of continuing to shelter and sustain this mountain forest. Meadow Corridor. The meadows shelter living things. The summits and high ridges above 3,000 meters are carpeted in expansive alpine meadows. Like a protective umbrella, these meadows shelter the living things that inhabit them. summertime is when the alpine meadows are in bloom. Bumblebees gather large amounts of nectar during the brief time the flowers are blossoming. The Shuishan grass lizard forages looking for insects in the meadow grasslands. Adapting to the windy alpine meadow environment, the wings of the cranefly and alpine grasshopper are so reduced and tiny, but this has given them much better adaptation to this environment, even though they cannot fly. The Danda Major Wildlife Habitat is an important corridor linking Taroko and Yushan National Parks. The unique alpine environment, climate conditions, and occurrence of fire have shaped the alpine meadows. Nengao Angdongjin Grassland. The Formosan sambar deer is like the gardener of the meadows. It is constantly nibbling the meadow's plants, suppressing the growth of plants. The deer are therefore a factor that helps maintain the meadow's ecosystem. The Guanshan Major Wildlife Habitat is the largest major wildlife habitat in eastern Taiwan. The establishment of this corridor will ensure that wildlife can freely move between different protected areas. Guanshan Corridor, the final piece of the corridor puzzle. Beautifully round Jiaming Lake is a cirque lake formed by ancient glaciers. This narrow corridor plays an extremely important role in the nature reserve system as a whole. The Guanshan Major Wildlife Habitat is currently the only corridor linking the island's two largest protected areas. Yushan is the island's highest point and has a summit elevation of 3,952 meters. It is not only the home of numerous living things, but also has over 100 species that are named after it. The island's southernmost mountain, exceeding 3,000 meters in height, is Mount Beidao. Located at the foot of Mount Beidawu, Daoshan Nature Reserve is the island's largest nature reserve, and there are 7 other nature reserves nearby. These areas connect a sea of trees extending from low to high elevations in the southern part of the island. Each year, the purple crow butterflies arrive at the low elevation mountains around the foot of Mount Dawu, especially the valleys, to spend the winter. In this mountain refuge, the butterflies can survive the winter. They will remain in this area until spring comes and they can begin a new journey. The windy, cloudy forests around Mount Dawu also hide many secrets. In recent years, scientists have found some previously unrecorded species here, and some new species have also been discovered. They are like wonders from nature's jewel box and precious things we should preserve for our descendants. Limitless bounty. The Central Mountain Range Conservation Corridor extends 300 kilometers and occupies 1/6 of the island's total area, including some of Taiwan's most spectacular landscapes. A long, long time ago, our ancestors made the mountain forests and fields their home and depended on nature's bounty to meet the needs of life. Afterwards, when the economy began to grow, the relationship between people and nature started to unravel. Nature reserves represent an eternal promise from the island's inhabitants to Mother Nature. This is the symbol of Taiwan's nature reserves. Preserving the Earth's unspoiled nature.